Want to know why? Ask how. Howard the Hugh! I've been asked to shout this. Mongoose! Right now, ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, is busy swallowing cities and towns in Iraq. It has taken the town that is adjacent to Iraq's biggest oil production facility. It has taken, in the process of taking Mosul. Mosul is the second largest city in Iraq. It has a population of 1.5 million. And in taking that city, ISIS has run across a national bank, and that national bank has put $450 million. Yes, they've stolen $450 million from a central bank, making this the richest terrorist organization in the world. But ISIS is no longer just a terrorist organization. ISIS is what it always wanted to be, an emirate, a state, a head of the caliphate. Right now, it occupies a territory the size of a small country. What is ISIS' secret? Well, the secret is something we've talked about many times before, that there is a proxy war in the Middle East between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Saudi Arabia has backed the rebels against Bashar Assad in Syria. Why? Because Bashar Assad and Syria are Iran's greatest allies in the Middle East. And if Saudi Arabia were able to effect regime change, it could control Syria and remove Syria as a power source for Iran. Things have not worked out very well. Why? Because the Saudis have followed an old dictum. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And the rebels in Syria, including the deep Islamist rebels, the jihadist rebels, the rebels who want to go back to the 7th century days of Muhammad himself, those rebels have been the Saudi pawn in this game. But those rebels have grown as a power, and they are threatening to take Baghdad. They are threatening to take the key holy Islamic, the holy Shiite cities in Iraq. The ISIS are Sunnis. They believe that Shiites are unbelievers. They believe that Shiites are apostates. The only thing to do with an apostate is cut off his head. The Shiites are out to gain control, or the Sunnis, ISIS, are out to gain control over Shiite holy sites, Karbala, which is the most holy site to Shiites. Saudi Arabia has set up a monster. It has set up an army that is swallowing territory. And the hard part for the Saudis to understand is that the enemy of your enemy may seem to be your friend, but if you bulk up that enemy will defeat your enemy and then will come after you. And ISIS does not want the Saudi royal family in power. They want themselves in power in Saudi Arabia. So ISIS is likely, right now it is threatening Iraq. It is also threatening Iran. Again, remember, this is a proxy war between Iran and Iraq. The Iranians are beginning to send forces. They've ultimately promised to send 10,000 men into Iran to help take back the city of Tikrit, for example. Iraq has become an Iranian territory. When I was speaking with some Iraqi friends the other day, Iraqi friends in the media, those Iraqi friends said, when I said that Iraq has become a province of Iran, they said no. Iraq has become something far worse. It has become a trash site. It has become a backyard, a neglected backyard for Iran. Iran is likely to extend its territory into parts of Iraq. The Kurds are likely, in fact, they are in the process. They have an army called the Peshmerga, and it does not run away, and it does not take its uniforms off. And the Kurds are likely to end up with an independent state out of all of this. But the worst thing for the Saudis is the very force they are nurturing is the force that could turn on them and destroy them. If only they knew, if only the Saudis knew a little Chinese history. The Chinese used to fight superpower enemies, and they used to fight them so hard that eventually people would not be able to purchase groceries. Why? because all the metal in the country was being melted down for weapons. In other words, all the coins were being melted down for weapons. There wasn't enough money to buy the things available in the markets. Periodically, the Chinese would try to get out of this bind of over-militarizing, of having a military budget to swallow their whole empire, by finding the enemy of their enemy, training the enemy of their enemy, arming the enemy of their enemy, and then sitting back and watching as the enemy of their enemy weakened and sometimes destroyed their enemy. There was only one small problem with this strategy for the Chinese. The enemy of their enemy, after defeating their superpower enemy, then turned on the Chinese and almost invariably came marching into China and took over. That's the problem that Saudi Arabia is up against. There is also a problem that we Americans are up against. If you review the history of strategy in the West, there is something major that is missing from every strategy book, and that is the power of a transcendent truth to marshal belief and to make people willing to give up their lives. The power of something bigger than you and bigger than me, bigger than all of us, to suck us in and give us valor, give us the willingness to live or die for that higher truth. Americans, in helping to set up the new Iraq, the Iraq that really was a pawn, has been a pawn for the Iranians. All we thought of was money. We think that the higher truth for which people work is money. We think that wars are caused by poverty. They are not. Rich people make war, not poor people. We think that simply raising the standard of living will satisfy the deepest human needs. That will not. The deepest human need is to feel a part of something transcendent, a truth worth living and dying for. The primary human need, aside from oxygen and food, is to feel a part of something far bigger than yourself. ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, is motivated by its commitment to a higher truth. It believes that if it brings Sharia law and Islam to the entire world, it will liberate the entire world. It may have to do it at the price of many lives, but these are idealists who are fighting on behalf of a larger truth that they believe will save the rest of humanity. You and I are part of a Western system. We don't understand how to believe in the transcendent power of that Western system. But that Western system has lifted the poor and oppressed in ways that have never been lifted before. You've heard me say it before. We have increased the wages of the poorest paid worker by a factor of 7. One worker today earns as much as the poorest paid worker in London earned in 1850. One of the poorest paid workers. Somebody working at Kentucky Fried Chicken out-earns 7 of the poorest paid workers in London in 1850. We have more than doubled the human lifespan. It has gone up in the last 150 years from 38.5 years to 78.5 years. We have massively increased the IQ of the normal human being in the West. Give a Stanford-Binet IQ test from 1900 to any batch of dummies in the street today, and the average kids will come out measuring as marginal geniuses, an IQ of 135. And we have increased the amount of peace in the world by a factor of 9. No other civilization has ever done that. And there's another missing transcendent truth, a transcendent truth we have to bring to the surface and come to believe in. The mandate of capitalism is messianic. It is to save your neighbor, and to save neighbors hundreds, thousands, and 10,000 miles away from you. When you build a new laptop, you give people powers they never had before. You give them salvation. When you produce a pop song and it becomes a hit, you take people out of their cares and crises for 3.5 minutes. You give them 3.5 minutes of secular salvation. When you produce a smartphone, you give people radically new powers. You save their lives. They no longer sit in loneliness in their apartment. They no longer feel desperately isolated from every other human being. Between Facebook and Twitter and the cell phone, they can have friends all over the world. Friends who share the peculiarities of their tastes and the peculiarities of their values. These are empowerments. These are secular salvations. You deliver them. I deliver them. We do our best to lift our fellow human beings, and we are enabled to do it by a Western system that is constantly creating things that have never literally been seen before in the cosmos, and giving powers to our fellow humans that are beyond anything this cosmos has ever seen. It's the Western system that is the system of secular salvation. It is the Western system that deserves our belief. It is the Western system, freedom of speech, pluralism, tolerance, democracy. It is, and higher ideals we strive for constantly. That is the system that really is worthy of our belief and worth living and dying for. That has to be a primary focus of our strategies when we are working to save the people of Iraq for secularism. Secularism in Iraq has been very powerful. I had dinner 8 days ago with Odeh Rashid, who grew up in Iraq, has been in Iraq almost all his life, made 2 feature films in Iraq that have won awards all over the world and been shown at the Museum of Modern Art in the United States, and founded the Independent Film Institute of Iraq. This is a person who flourishes because of the secularism that Iraq had under guess who? Saddam Hussein. And that secularism is worth fighting for, because it is what allows us to create things that save and uplift our fellow human beings. ISIS is a pile of shit and needs to be defeated. Why? On behalf of a transcendent truth that has everything in the world to do with your altruism and mine, your idealism and mine, our desire to contribute to the lives of our fellow human beings. This is Howard the Humongous speaking to you from the future. It's your job and my job to make, or want to know why? Ask how. Now, for the off button. I think I have found it. No, I didn't find it. Oh, and it's not letting me turn it off. Ah! This machine is being recalcitrant and reluctant tonight. I don't know if it's recorded all of this. I don't know if we're recording right now.